Hi there, my name's Rachel Goodwin and welcome to Sacred You. I'm a spiritual teacher, energy healer and channel for Sarah, the Magdalene's daughter, and the lineage of the Blue Rose. I live in Denmark in the town of Roskilde, which is full of divine holy springs. And I love all things magical, spiritual and new earth. And I'm here to share conversations that help us find the sacredness all around us and within each of us, within each of you. You can find out more about my work at rachelgoodwin.dk. Today, thank you really so much for being here with us today. To Veronica Goodchild. Veronica is Professor Emerita at Pacifica Graduate Institute, where she has taught for many, many years courses on Jungian, depth psychology, and has had 35 years as a practicing Jungian psychotherapist. Now, I discovered Veronica after I had an experience with a portal opening up across the road where I live, where there's a lot of sacred spring ponds running through, and I came to discover that this was energy. It came through from Venus, came through me, went into the stone in the ground underneath me and anchored itself there, and it's a portal for the Blue Rose. And I searched all over the internet and I did find a few bits and pieces here and there, but Veronica was the only person who I found something that was quite substantial. And she had written a wonderful paper called The Magdalene Mysteries and Path of the Blue Rose. And you can actually find that on her website. I put the link down in the show notes. And that was my first introduction to her. And since then, I've been watching interviews that she's done, talks that she's given, and it's really, as I'm talking about in the interview, it's really helped me feel that what I'm experiencing, someone else is mirroring that back to me and able to express it really, really, really well in writing. So we had a lovely time today talking about the Blue Rose, and all sorts of other related things as well. So hope you enjoy our chat and our conversation. So welcome everyone to another episode of Sacred You. It's been a little while since we did one, but I'm really over the moon to welcome Veronica Goodchild. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I do appreciate it.
Oh, it's so lovely to talk to you. So you're in France, that's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, we live down in the southwest. Qatar country, sometimes people know it as. Yeah, it's often called the forgotten corner of France, because if you say to people you live in the southwest, they think you mean the south of France. They think you mean Nice or, Cannes or something.
Okay.
But no, we go around the corner down towards the Pyrenees and Spain, really.
How's the weather where you are today?
Well, today it's very autumnal and raining, but the last few days have been absolutely magical. It's still going back and forth a bit, yeah.
Yeah. We had rain here for several hours this morning. So here in Denmark, I think it's about 12 degrees, which is not bad. And we've got sun now. So that's nice. Rather nice to sit and look at. No, I didn't know people called that the part of the Languedoc where you are the forgotten country. I went there when I was a child.
Yeah.
My parents took me on holiday to France every year. So I grew up in Deal in Kent, which is right near Dover. And my dad actually worked for Sea-Link. He was an engineer. And Sea-Link was like Britain's nationalised ferry industry.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And my parents went off to language school, evening school, and learnt French. And they both really wanted me to speak French, but I was so self-conscious. And I studied it at school for 5 years. I never really.
Yeah,
I never really did. But we went on holiday to France every year. And my dad, who was he was such an atheist. He read the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And he took us off to Rennes le Chateau. Yeah, which like looking back now, I sort of think, because then he's passed now, so I can't ask him about this. And it was just such a shame because I'd love to know really what was that all about. He was just fascinated
Yeah.
with the whole story. But I do remember my dad, because he used to drive quite fast, driving up those roads all the way up the mountain. And my
That's
mum,
right.
yeah, my mum's sitting there going, slow down,
Yeah, I
slow
know,
down.
because it's quite a curvy road all the way up to the top of Rennes le Chateau there. Yeah.
But I love that part of France. I have
Oh,
been
it's so
back since.
beautiful.
What's it
It's
like
absolutely,
living there?
oh, it's so beautiful. That was one of the things that sort of helped make a decision to move here. Because when we first came here, specifically to this part, we started going back to France in 2013. And, I lived in the States ever since my early 20s. So my whole adult life has been in the States. But anyway, um, I just had this urge. I said, I really want to go back to France. I haven't seen the cave art, all of this. But yeah, when we actually, it was a couple of years later when we actually came down to this area. And I remember just getting out of the car and going, Je suis chez moi. I knew I was home.
Yeah,
It was just one of those moments. I think the land, the earth, there's a kind of spirituality in the earth that I experience here, which is it's not really like anywhere else I've experienced. And certainly I've been to sacred landscapes, but this has a very special blue quality to it, I always felt, actually, in the mountains. But yeah, so it's so beautiful. It's got Cathar castles, it's got these villages on top of hills that, which of course is elsewhere in France too, but I don't know, it's just got that special feeling. Loads of we live opposite a vineyard here, the edge of the village we live in. So there are loads of vineyards in this particular area. And then as you go slightly west of the area, it gets more farmland and things like that. But yeah, it's a very beautiful part. And of
yeah,
course, it's filled with Cathar lore, the sort of reincarnated Essenes. Um, and you can drive from Toulouse Airport, and there'll suddenly be a notice you are in Cathar country. Yeah. So.
yeah. And how do you find like living in France in a French culture? How is that for you?
Well, I used to come here as a child as well, and I always felt, and increasingly from time to time in my adult life, I thought, oh, I really want to live in France. I really felt that I wanted to live here. And then when we came to this part, I knew it was this part. Oof. How to say? I mean, there are so many levels to that question because, of course, the landscape itself has such a history, and I'm sure I've participated in it. But on the surface of things, it's a much different life, obviously, from our life in California. And I miss some of America. I mean, I definitely do. Like shops not closing between 12 and 2 every lunchtime, or restaurants at night, open from 7 to 9 or something like that. That's a little annoying because you go down to Spain and it's like, lunch is at 1, goes on till 5. Dinner doesn't even, in restaurants, doesn't even open till, restaurants don't even open till 8 or 9. So, there are those sorts of things, but in terms of the beauty of the landscape and a sense of the history of the land and the amazing and terrible history too as well. And of course, this area is very strongly connected to Mary Magdalene. And I think that's hugely influences how I feel about being here.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And I think out of all the places where we went to when I was a kid, I have to say I think that area really is my favorite. And because I love the mountains, but it's not that far from the sea either.
No, we're about an hour from the sea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And because
Yeah.
I also love the sea, I don't like living too far inland.
No,
So
I can relate to that because we used to live on the Pacific, and that's actually the one thing when we left California, I knew that would be the one thing I would miss, and it has been. And so, we just try to go to the coast when we can. Yeah.
yeah. Where are you from originally, Veronica?
Well, I was born in my mother's hometown, which was Stamford in Lincolnshire. And my father was an Anglican clergyman. And we moved, well, the first 2 years of my life, he was in London. And then I don't remember that really. I have one memory from that time. And then we went to Horsham in Sussex. I have very vivid memories of our years there. And then as he kind of went up the ladder, we went up to Northamptonshire in the Midlands. And then we lived out in the country there, a very beautiful country as well. And then we moved to London. So all my teenage years were spent in London. And yeah, from there I went to New York.
Wow, so you've moved around quite a
A
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
What did you do in New York?
Well, first of all, I worked in a psychiatric halfway house. It was partly out of the difficulty I found adjusting to American culture. It truly is, a land
Different.
separated
Yeah.
by a common language.
Yeah.
Everything was different. The humor was different. The language was different. It was really challenging. And so I had a first sort of conscious crisis and I started therapy. And it was a kind of Rogerian therapy at that point. And I found it really useful because I didn't really know what a feeling was. So, yeah, that was quite challenging. In any event, what I actually became interested in was what is it that actually makes people change? I became really, really interested in that question. And so I thought, okay, well, go and put yourself in the lion's den and see what happens. So I did. I worked at this halfway house, and so I was working with schizophrenics and bipolar disorders and all of this. And what I really came to see was that if you engage people with these disorders and take them seriously and don't treat them like patients and sick people, it's just extraordinary what can happen. And so that was a great influence on me. And then I went to get my master's at Columbia. And during that time was when I had more of a spiritual crisis, I would say. And that's when I knew I had to get into Jungian analysis because I had read Jung's work since I was a teenager. And when soon after I landed in New York, someone gave me a copy of Jung's Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. And that was one of those books that you change your life. That changed my life. I knew when I read that book that I had arrived home because Jung also was the son of a clergyman.
Yes.
And one of the things that I used to struggle with mightily with my father, who I was very close to, was why he had chosen the profession that he did. And he was never really able to answer that question. It used to make him very anxious. And at least that's what I picked up. And so when I first went to university in England, from an experience I actually had in the in Palestine right after my A-levels. I went there for a month. I was going to read law, but then I changed to theology. And when I was studying theology, I kept wondering why we weren't reading the mystics. It was all this philosophy, comparative study, okay, doctrine, history, all of this stuff, but where was the and where were the Essene Gospels? They'd already been discovered,
Okay.
So I just felt, no, something's missing here. But when I said, why aren't we discussing and reading mystics? Because I'd read them as a teenager, people just laughed at me. They thought that was ridiculous. Why would you want to just, But it was actually an experience I had in Palestine. One of them was at the Sea of Galilee. I was 18, I worked on a kibbutz, and then I met this friend there, and she and I used to hitch around in the afternoons to go to all the various places. And we went to the Sea of Galilee, and I can remember just standing on the shore there. And I had this sort of like awakening moment. I could suddenly see the whole world as like a veil. And it was like a veil containing a kind of spiritual essence that was kind of emanating from beyond, but also very present in the world. And that made a huge impression on me, which is why I thought, oh, I'll go and study religion.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I tried doing religious studies for A level. I went to a girls' grammar in Dover and stayed on in the sixth form, and RE was one of my A levels, but I only lasted a term.
yeah, good for you. Yeah.
I mean, I can remember sitting there and they were talking about the significance of how many jars were on a shelf. And then the meanings that were given were so devoid of any meaning at all. And I was sitting there thinking, no, oh
Yeah,
my
what is
God.
this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was so, I guess, I mean, at the time I didn't know I had any spirituality in me. That was something that I hadn't sort of discovered in myself yet. But I knew there was something really serious missing. And I dropped out of the sixth form and went and worked in a bank because I just absolutely had no clue what to do. And then after a couple of years, I joined the intelligence service in the
Oh,
RAF.
wow. I want to hear about that.
Well, again, yeah, but again, I was desperately looking for something. And
Yeah.
I'd been, because I grew up, on the Kent coast where the Battle of Britain was fought, there's a lot of stories and history around there. And I was very caught up in like, what those young men did and how they gave their lives and their bravery and their nobility. And I was really caught up in the romanticism of it. And that was why I joined the Air Force. And yeah, I was training to be a communication systems analyst.
Yeah.
But of course, what I actually found was reality. And there was nothing really romantic. And we were spying, I would have been spying on but what Russia and places like that. But when I was there, the Berlin Wall went down. And
Yes.
so when I said, look, I'd really like to leave, they went, okay. And they didn't, because in those days they would like make you pay for like and they didn't, because the Berlin Wall had gone down, they actually needed less people in my job.
Ah,
So,
good.
so,
Yeah.
so I just left. Then I got married and moved out to Holland. And again, that went completely wrong. And then I sat down and found something in myself that actually worked for me. And that is I went back to London and I trained as a psychiatric nurse.
Oh,
Yeah, and I did that. I did that for
interesting.
7 years, and that's been my basis for everything really, because I learned so much about
Yeah.
myself, about people, just watching, observing, being part of it all.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a very, very stressful job. I mean, and
Yeah.
in London hospitals as well, there's no two ways about it. It's not.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah, it's not, but it's a speciality in the UK. You train as a psychiatric nurse, not as a general nurse.
You don't
So
start as a nurse and then kind of add it on kind of thing. Yeah.
no, and in pretty much all other countries, they don't do that. They take nurses, and then you can go into psychiatry. And in the UK, the psychiatric nurses, they're a different breed of people, they're a different type of people.
Yeah.
And I really did kind of fit in with that. And I really liked working with people with mental health issues. I felt it was, although people were, in difficulty, it felt, I found the world outside those walls just to be so false and so constructed with the way that we live, with business and corporations. And there
very
is
impersonal.
that's all gone. That's gone inside a psychiatric ward. None of that matters. And it was actually more bearable for me to be in there than it was to be sort of,
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
It was more real somehow.
Yeah, exactly. It was. And I could be myself and they could be themselves. And psychiatric nursing, it's not so much a discipline. There's certain things you learn, and they turned it into a degree now, and you study sociology and things like that. But at the end of the day, you are kind of left to do what you want to do, And so, I had a great time. Sort of really talking to people and getting to know them, and like bringing my sort of way of healing, I suppose, to the work and the things that I discovered that had helped me. And but I ended up specializing in therapeutic communities, in psychosocial nursing.
Oh, how funny. We have something of a parallel life going on here.
Yeah. And they sponsored me to go off and study with the Tavistock for a year. They had a healthcare professional course where we would sit and have our own, group. I did a lot of group work. Both for myself and like in my work. And I loved that. That is the one thing I miss, actually, because it's so powerful. But when I looked at becoming a like facilitator for the group psychoanalysis, you had to go into analysis 3 times a week. And that just wasn't manageable for me, either with my energy, my time, or financially. That you needed a lot of money to do that. But it's okay. I don't think I was supposed to sort of do that path really, but I did love it. I really loved it.
Sounds like life had another path for you.
Yeah, it did. So and I'm in the end I had to step out of the job though, because I got burnt out, basically. I just got burnt out. Yeah.
It's very challenging because you're working, yourself is your instrument in those fields. So you're working on, not just mental fields, but deeply emotional ones as well. And it can get really tiring. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also the system is quite harsh. And I really took some fights with the medical profession and people like that. I mean, and it's quite easy to get promoted around London. I don't know how it is now, but, I got promoted quite fast, and I was, I would really stand my ground around things that just things that I thought were immoral, basically. But it took a lot of energy,
Yeah. Good for you, though.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't regret it. I don't regret it. You don't know what that world is like unless you work in that sector, because our society is so segmented that we kind of don't see people with schizophrenia or having breakdowns, or and I worked in prisons, I worked in private healthcare in the Roehampton Priory. So I've worked with people from every single sector of society, from the homeless to the extremely wealthy and privileged. And that was fascinating, and really showed me that money, it brings a lot of problems, actually. Yeah. Hi, I'm Rachel Goodwin. I'm a spiritual teacher, energy healer, and therapist. And I channel Sarah, daughter of the Magdalene, and the Blue Rose. Now, to book an individual session with me, go to my website, rachelgoodwin.dk. Ah, the blue rose. Let's talk about the blue rose. How did that came in with a dream again, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, most of the turning points in my life have come through dreams, really. Um, and yeah, it was a dream that put me onto that kind of search, I suppose.
Mm.
And so I'll just tell the dream and its context. So the dream, we had been in Italy for a month, and we were actually on our way for the first time down here in this area, the Languedoc area. But we went on a bus from Perugia, because I said, oh, let's go on a bus because we can see the landscape all up the west coast of Italy on our way. So the bus stopped in Genoa, and then we were going to get a bus to Montpellier, I think, and then rent a car from there. So that night, the night we stayed in Genoa, or rather the next morning, the morning we were coming down into the Languedoc, I had this dream. It was more like a dream vision, really. And in the dream, I was working with a woman on her dreams by the shore of an ocean. And suddenly I look up and I see, as if like a veil is kind of parting, a chalice cup. And I knew in the dream that it was the chalice of the Grail. And as I look at it, I sort of marvel at this cup, sort of suspended between the sky and the sea below. And it's sort of receiving energy from above. And the interesting detail was that it was drawing up water from below and then sort of showering it out like a fountain, like that. It was just an extraordinary sight. And the kind of power, the numinosity, Jung sometimes uses that word, of the dream, meaning quite a impressive, overwhelming sort of experience emotionally and spiritually. And it actually propelled me out of sleep. It sort of just propelled me out of, it was 6 a.m. and I just remember the sun, it was June the 22nd of 2016. And I remember, I had to write it down right away before I forgot, but it made a profound impression, as those dreams often do. And the thing was that because we had just come from Perugia and we'd been to Assisi as well, I had been seeing lots of paintings, statues, all of Mary Magdalene all over the place. And of course, her emblem, if you like, is her alabaster jar. And so when the first thing happened to me as I was writing the dream down and writing just what was coming to me about it as I was writing it down, was that the dream made me think immediately of Mary Magdalene and her alabaster jar, even though in the dream it was a Grail chalice. So from the get-go, I suppose, Mary Magdalene being, was connected for me with the Grail legends. And then, of course, I found out that she is connected with the Grail legends too, which I didn't know. And there's lots of evidence for that, particularly I would say in the 12th century, when Mary worship was sort of on the rise, and that was the big century where the Grail legends were spawned all over the place in France and Europe and Germany and elsewhere, many different versions of the Grail legends. Yeah, so, and then there are the books by Lawrence Gardner. I don't know whether you know his work, but he writes a lot about Mary Magdalene's connection with the Grail.
Yeah, I haven't read them. I know about them and I know the things that he said. I haven't actually read those books though.
Yeah, they're really wonderful books, whatever I mean, there are so many books and ideas about Mary Magdalene. I mean, it's almost endless. So I tried after this to obviously read as broadly as I could about them all. And in the end, I found that I would just kind of, the thing that would, if something resonated inside me about what I was reading, then I'd be, I'd be fine with it. But I knew that the journey that I was initiated on would be mine, and my experience of what was clearly an archetypal story. And that's all one can ever do is embody the bit that you get, So that was my goal. But the way it or has been is continuing. This is now 8 years later. So, but what got me on to the Blue Rose was because it was such a kind of archetypal dream, I felt very strongly that I wanted to know more specifically why that particular symbol had come to me. And so there's something in Jungian psychology that maybe many of your viewers will be familiar with, which is active imagination. It's a kind of imaginative process whereby you engage unknowns in dreams in order to deepen your understanding of what your connection with them is. And so the first time I did one of those, it was a sort of combination of a breathing meditation and a shamanic journey sort of thing. And the first time I did one of those, Mary Magdalene shot into just like appeared in my imagination, in the imagination. I don't know that it was particularly mine, but I experienced it. So she came in, and I'm just sort of starting to say, well, can you help me understand why this dream has been given and why I'm linking it to you? And because I didn't expect to even see her. I thought it would be something about the Grail and the Grail stories. But it was her. And she said, this is what she said. She said, follow the blue rose, the path of the blue rose. And then she disappeared. Literally, it was like that.
I just love that. I
Just
love that though.
extraordinary. I mean, oh my God, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
So that's what started it. Mary Magdalene and the Blue Rose. That's my Grail quest.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love
So
that.
it's gone on from there, really.
Mary Magdalene was one of the first people that came forward for me. After I left nursing, I trained as a hypnotherapist and a healer. And there's a whole long story to that, but I won't go into that because I kind of had a before and an after. I was a very skeptical person who wouldn't
Yeah.
have touched any of these things with a barge pole, to be honest. And I'm always really open about that because people are quite shocked to hear that about me, since I have channel books and things that I've written, but it really wasn't like how I was brought up, and where I came from. But after my mother died, when my mother died when I was 26, I couldn't deny that I could feel her presence around me.
Mm. Mm.
And she had started exploring spirituality, so she got me started on it before she passed. And she had a book of the Tibetan book of living and dying, and there was chapters in there of things that you read out for someone who had passed. And this was
Mm.
my mum, who I just totally loved her. So although it wasn't my thing, I read these things out, these prayers out, and I
That's
felt
cool.
stuff happening, and I was like, what the, it was such a shock. So that kind of, and then it just went on and on and on and on. But so a long way, and it's never stopped. And so a long way down the road, I used to go to workshops in Surrey, and I lived in Reigate and Red Hill in Surrey, and there was it was a channeling class that I went to, and I went, and yeah, first person who came along was Yeshua, and I was a bit like, oh, I wanted Kuan Yin or someone, you know? And he said to me, I'm not who you've been told I am. I'm like, okay. But I was still a bit biased against men. So I was still not that keen. But Lady Nada stepped forward for me
Oh,
as she was being called in this class. And I worked with her for a while, for probably a year or so. And then at some point I realized this is Mary Magdalene. This is Mary Magdalene. And I worked with her for a lot of years. She helped me with a lot of emotional healing.
wow.
And I really feel, because I mean, she's sort of expressed in a lot of different ways, sort of in New Age circles. And one of them is very much in the body with sensuality and sexuality and all that kind of thing. And, I don't have any kind of argument against that. But for me, it's always been about love and emotional healing and being contained and being held. And that kind of healing that you need at your core, if you're ever really going to move on to
Yeah.
anything else, if you're ever really going to be rooted and anchored in this world and grounded, you have to have, it's almost like she's foundational for me.
No, that's lovely. That's a very beautiful description. Yeah.
And she's come back very, I don't kind of choose what I'm working with. Things come in, and Sophia and Mary Magdalene just suddenly were just there for me some months back, and I've been doing a lot of ancestral healing, and I think that's why I have this lovely book by Sandra Easter called Jung and the Ancestors, and she taught at the Pacifica University. The ancestral work has been really, really
It's powerful stuff. Yeah.
something, people talk about and they put it sort of alongside a lot of other things. But from what I've read about, well, Carl Jung wrote about it, it really surprised me how much he prioritized it.
Yeah.
And I learned that through,
His work was responding to the unfinished answers and
yeah,
questions
yeah,
of the ancestors.
yeah. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of work with her. And then later on, her daughter Sarah came in, and that was much more challenging for me because she holds the two energies, the divine masculinity and the divine feminine. And I wasn't so comfortable going with the divine masculine, even though it's in oneness, it was still challenging for me to even have it there. So it really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And then I did that for years and years. And then I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when was COVID? How long ago was that now?
About 4 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it depends when you date it from, but lockdown was early March 2020, here anyway.
I went, so I do a lot of work with the land. I'm really feel the land as an energy, almost like a person in a
Yeah.
way. So I get to know areas of land and get to know their personality, if you like, and kind of communicate with it. And where I live in Roskilde, we have an abundance of sacred springs. We're on top of glacier meltwater that got caught by this huge layer of lime in Shayland, where I live. And there's all these springs that come up. And actually, Roskilde was kind of the original place of Christianity in Denmark. And there was just, it was a bit like how England has a pub on every street. It used to have like a church on every street.
Yeah.
And it is, these days it's still got the Domkirke, the cathedral with all the kings and queens. It's still kind of known as the center of Christianity. But I mean, it is a really ancient sort of spiritual town. The Danes don't see it that way now because they're very pragmatic about religion, let's say. They just go to church for sort of marriages and funerals and confirmation and that's it really. But across the road from where I live, there's ponds full of spring water.
Oh,
And
gorgeous.
I do love living here. And it was during COVID, I went for a walk and it was nighttime, which was unusual because I'm usually quite tired by the evening, don't have the energy. But I think I realized I hadn't been out all day because I've been working on the computer. So I went out for a walk and the star in the sky was just so bright. And I realized there was this one star that just kept winking at me. And I was transfixed by it. And I was thinking, that's got to be Venus. That's the only one that is that big. And wherever I walked, it was just kind of there in front of me. And then I went and stood next to one of these ponds. And it was where there's some stones. And it's interesting how stones seem to ground and anchor sacred energies.
Yeah,
And I
really
went
do.
and stood, and it was a place where there was a bench, but because it was COVID, they'd removed this bench probably to put a new one in. And then they hadn't put it back because they'd all had to stop work. And there hadn't been a bench there for like months and months. And I was standing on these like cobbled stones looking up at Venus. And this energy just came in through me. And I was completely transfixed. And I was just standing. And this, it's not the first time this has happened. But I was standing there for minutes and minutes and minutes with all this energy like coming through me. And I was like, at the end, I was like, whoa, that was amazing. What a beautiful energy. Thank you. And then I went home and probably sat and watched telly with my husband and had a cup of tea. And then when I was walking again, like, because it's a place I walk regularly, I kept thinking, that energy's still there. That energy's still there. Oh my God. And that hadn't happened to me before. I have been transfixed by energies. That happened to me in the church at Rennes-le-Château, but that came up from underneath, actually. But and I realized that what had come through had grounded and anchored into that spot. And this energy was lovely, but I had no idea what it was. And then I was interviewing somebody for this podcast, a lady called Mary Tobin, and she has a website called Blue Rose Healing, and she works with the Blue Rose. And she'd done a channeling about the Blue Rose. And I was reading this channeling and I could feel the energy from it. And I was like, oh my God, this is the energy of what's come up across the road. That's the Blue Rose energy. There is a bench on it now, and I actually can go and sit in this portal of Blue Rose energy.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
That's really amazing.
yeah,
What a beautiful story.
yeah. So that's why I started searching for like, what is this all about? And
Yeah.
what does this mean? And because it felt really, really significant. And yeah, I mean, I suppose I do. I really think, I really think this is significant for our time. And I suppose that thing you said about Jung, he was like answering the unanswered questions. It feels to me like the Blue Rose energy is here to heal those parts of ourselves of the divine feminine that have been lost.
Yeah.
Those are the things that keep coming up over and over again for me, because I mean, women's behavior culturally has been so changed over the hundreds of years in Europe through the witch burnings and the enclosure of the land. And I read when I started looking into all of that and the history before it, I was so shocked at how women were like literally silenced. And they speak up for me. They speak up again. The Blue Rose. I kind of see it as a lineage. Mary Magdalene's there, but there's others, and it feels really vast and powerful, and something that you can really like pull around yourself, you know?
Well, it's certainly activated. And you just mentioned somebody else whose name I wasn't aware of, but I love to find people, or like yourself, who contacted me, and because I just kind of thought, initially, can I really talk about this stuff? And I think that part of what I'm doing at the moment is feeling like this obligation. Yeah, you got to talk up about this. This is activated in so many ways, specifically at the moment, actually. So it's so interesting, everybody's unique story about how they come to her, or her connection to the blue rose, or the blue rose energy, or yeah, yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, after the thing in Israel when I was 18, about another 20 or so years later, I had this dream that I was studying St. John's Gospel in a group, and we were studying the text, as I had actually in Greek, in London, at London University. And but I was thinking, there's more going on here. And anyway, the rest of the group, kind of, we'd finished the session and they were all leaving, and I was sitting there and I was saying to myself, there's another gospel underneath this gospel. And was another of those kind of stepping stones, because I just knew it. I knew that John's gospel was based on one underneath it. And then when another sort of couple of decades, I think I'm a slow learner. And when I was told about the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, have you read that?
Yes.
Yeah. When I read that, I knew that was the gospel underneath John's Gospel. And so that was like yet another stepping stone with this connection to her, like always knowing it somewhere. But yeah, definitely couldn't talk about some of these things. Yeah, they had to wait, I suppose. I worked with a shaman in the 80s, and I remember her saying to me, she said, she was the one that connected me with the Pleiades. I didn't know anything about star beings or anything. She just said, you got the mark, anyway, it wasn't because she was telling me that and then I thought it. It was because I was having experiences and she helped me understand what they were about. So, which is also a blue energy, by the way. Yeah, I'd love to collect all these stories of how people arrive at this, because do you know Nancy Rebecca?
No.
She is an intuitive. She was trained as a nurse. She's American. She lives in Washington State, I think. And the reason I quite fortuitously heard about her was because I really like the UK astrologer Pam Gregory. Do you ever listen to
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
readings? Anyway, she was interviewing this woman, and Nancy was Rebecca, and I can't remember if this was sometime this past year. I think it was sometimes earlier this year. And she doesn't often interview people. But anyway, she was interviewing this woman, and this woman was talking about this blue energy coming to our Earth in these particular astrological portals, as it turns out. She didn't know that they were at particular portals. It's just that when she looked at the dates of when she was seeing it, this energy coming from the cosmos, and then Pam Gregory looked at the astrology, it was like in portal moments in astrology. Well, she just this last week, she's starting a whole course called The Blue Light Awakening, or something like that. And she's not just talking about blue light, she's talking about blue light beings, and how for her they're connected from Sirius. So yeah, it's and she said it's full on. It started on the full moon of October the 17th, which is just last Thursday. And so this, and I'm sure the Magdalenes, I just, you know these things, don't you? It's just that, so this is the blue rose energy coming in spades, I think, to our planet, precisely for the reasons that you're mentioning, because we need deep healing on all the levels that we need it. And, I think about the Cathars here who, their figureheads were Magdalene's gospel and Jesus and the teachings of love of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And, they thought the church was corrupt and all of that, which it is in many instances, as we know. Yeah, so they got extinguished. So there's such wounding to her, labeled as a prostitute till only a very recent in Vatican history have they undone that. So for 2,000 years, she was completely and utterly denigrated. And when you think from the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, just in the first verse of the first chapter, she says, I was with him from the beginning and I'm with him at the end. She came in already as an enlightened being. And then you read her vision at the end, and and this is what was just bastardized in the way that it has been. I mean, it's so egregious. I don't even know what the word is. So I'm really glad that she's coming back, and that she's coming back in all the ways that she is. And I think the Blue Rose, as you're talking about it, and some of the other people you've mentioned, is a wondrous and wonderful thing, and we should be supporting it as much as we can.
Yeah, and it definitely seems to be something that people just feel. Like when I first came across Mary Magdalene, and I just loved her. I couldn't really say why.
Yeah.
And then I felt with Sarah the same thing, and then I felt the same with the Blue Rose. And there's not really a rationality to this. You have the emotions, you have the feelings, and then you find out why over years, like there's this long journey of discovering. But I see that in so many other people as well, that it can't help but grow. And it is really, really beautiful. And yeah, I mean, it's an obsession for me, I suppose. Really, I could say that I've turned into my work, because I can't actually do anything else.
But that's good, isn't it? I mean, there are these three ways of knowing from experience, and becoming what you know. You're on that highest rung, becoming what you know.
Yeah, and life kind of forced me into it. I mean, me and my husband, we tried to live in the UK. He tried to get work in universities over there, but his childhood studies, he specializes in younger children, like Vogelstua, that's sort of like 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 age, and it's not really a thing in the UK. So in the end, we had to just go, okay, we're going to have to live in Denmark. Denmark doesn't recognize my nursing qualification. It's also really, really hard to get work here if you're a foreigner, if you don't have particular skill set. And because I'm not an IT expert or engineer or
name of the game, isn't it, these days?
Yeah. So I kind of, in the end, I went, I had been doing lots of healing work and things in the UK. So I said, I'm just going to set up my own business then, because what I have to do something with my time, this is what I'll do. And
I love your connection with that energy with water, because
so
in the
much,
longer term, Mary is known as Mistress of the Waters.
Yeah, and Roskilde is on a fjord as well. So I am literally right next to the water, both from the land and from the sea as well. And one of the things that has kept me going in Denmark, because I do find the climate quite challenging, is swimming in the fjord. I swim in the fjord all year round. I'm a winter bather.
No way.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. And like people who know me from before I came here were just like, because I'm not that sort of person, you know, I'm not a sort of a get up in the 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a run sort of person. But I just found that it keeps my mental health in a really good state. It's so
yeah.
euphoric going
Invigorating.
into cold water.
Yeah.
And then luckily now after some years I had to wait, but I got into the winter bathing club and they have got a sauna as well.
I was going to say.
And that is so spiritualizing. I mean, just the energy that's built up in there. And of course, there's all these elementals and, you know, other sort of invisible. Of course, I think they don't really talk about that. The Finns have a huge sauna culture where they totally believe that every sauna has its own nature spirit, and you mustn't talk about politics or anything, you mustn't have a loud
Oh, that's
voice, and
good.
they have an amazing sauna culture, the Finns. But it's a beautiful gift. It's really a beautiful gift. And you know, because there are a lot of days in the winter where it's so grey.
Yeah.
We're southern Scandinavia, so we don't really get huge amount of snow, but we get a lot of grey low cloud cover, which is so depressing. I find
That's so right. Yeah.
that going off, you know,
Yeah.
and I'll go at 6:30 in the morning, totally sort of sets my day off with a really, really good energy. So like I'm just, yeah, the springs in Roskilde are amazing. I mean, I've written guidebooks about it because when I came here, that's all I did. I would just go and sit at these different springs, and they all
Mm.
have a different vibration. They have a different like overlighting, you know, deity or nature spirit or whatever. And they're yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I'm completely obsessed with that sort of thing.
Well, it sounds like you're really attuned to it.
Mm,
It's 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 addressing you.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not just that you're obsessed with it. It's like it's talking to you and you're
yeah,
responding. And
yeah.
I think, nature loves that. I mean, I really discovered that when I did my solo walks on a couple of the uh, Compostela paths in France here. That was a real teacher for me about, something that I'd always experienced as a child and at various points. But I remember the discipline, if you like, of getting up and walking, you know, 20, 30 kilometers a day, and then not just having a long walk and having a rest the next day, but you get up the next day and you do it
Do it
too.
again.
And, it breaks down your ego consciousness completely. And
Mm,
it just gave me a felt sense of that. I mean, so strongly, the spirit of nature. And it is a presence. She is a presence. And, the ancients had various words for this, so they knew about it all. But it's, we grow up in a culture that's so far removed from nature. And it's really lovely. People, when they go on the Camino, they take all their problems, because one does, you carry them, and it's a path of stars. It's a Compostela. You're meant to surrender to the process that you're engaging, if you like. But honestly, the first one I did was only 12 days. And by the time I got to Conques, from Le Puy-en-Velay to Conques, I couldn't even remember what my problems were. It was like, what problems? What? I can't remember. Because the main message I got, there was just a main message. And the main message was, don't fret about environmental crises. The earth, we just want to be loved. It was very simple, because what was sort of inspiring me to do them in the first place was this terrible overwhelm about the environmental crisis. And it seems so massive. I got sort of frozen by it. It was just too much. And But the first one I did was really about, okay, so you don't want to read any more statistics because that just raises your anxiety. No more scientific. We know there's such a thing. And so I just thought, okay, so why don't you just do a meditation for the earth and walk solo for 12 days? And then the next one I did was for a month. So they're powerful, powerful rituals, and you do get messages. Your soul is addressed as you're engaging with whatever. I would just engage with whatever, struck my imagination, whether it was a rock or going through a wood or a cat or a horse or, whatever sort of felt like an invitation to have a conversation, if you like. Yeah, it's a very powerful experience, really powerful.
I have a lovely friend, Hannah, who's Danish, and she walks a Camino every year and has been doing that for years and years. And she goes on different ones. And I had to go to language school. I say had to because of Brexit. So I had to get residency in Denmark, otherwise I would lose my right to live here. And I had to go for 2.5 years because it was a really long course that we had to study, and it was very academic and difficult. They're not awfully keen on immigrants in Denmark. Not the people, but the government as it was. And I had to give a talk, and I was like, oh, what am I going to talk about? And also because, like I said, like when I was a kid, I wouldn't talk French because I was so self-conscious. I'm the same with Danish. I really suffer from anxiety trying to speak in a foreign language. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to give a talk in something I really care about. So I gave a talk on, because I think it's something like 0.01% of the population or something that goes to church. Maybe it's not quite that low in Denmark. And my talk was on why so few people are going to church in Denmark but are walking on the Camino.
Fantastic.
And at the end of it, the guy, he asked me, he said, in Denmark, they are in Sweden, because Sweden are very, very gender equalizing. They're starting to call God she. How do you feel about that? I was like, well, I was so glad you asked me that question. It's like, but of course, all in Danish. And at the end of the exam, they did say it was good, Rachel, but your English accent is very strong.
Uh,
To
but
which
they
I thought, well, yeah.
make sense. I guess they had to
Oh.
find something to slightly.
Well, I mean, they expect a lot. They really do. They really do expect a lot. But that's how it is. That's how it is. My past and all the rest of it. And I may one day get citizenship in Denmark. I don't know. I don't know. I put all my papers in, and they take 2 years and I haven't heard. It's been over a year. I haven't heard anything. But I don't think they can kick me out now. I've got residency. So
Oh, right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an uncertain world we live in now, though, with these kinds of things.
Absolutely, on so many fronts, really, too. I mean, yeah, one of my best friends lives in Nashville, North Carolina, and of course, people would retire there because it was known for no kind of big climate events.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
luckily her house was okay, but she can't live there at the moment because there's no electricity or.
I know. I have a very dear friend, who I did Seidr training in Sweden for 2 years. That's Nordic shamanism. And I have a very dear friend, Megan, who lives in Asheville, and she wrote to me, because I mean they had to leave. They've got two young children, and so she said we're going to have to leave because there's no water for the next couple of months, and so they went to stay with her mother-in-law in Florida. And then she wrote to me and said, Rachel, there's another hurricane coming.
Oh no.
And I think we have to go. I think we have to go. And I've pulled some runes and it really doesn't look good, but can you pull some for me? Because I want to make sure that we really have to leave, because we've just had to leave one home and I pulled some runes and it really didn't look good. So yeah, they had to go again. And I did a hurricane protection spell
Yeah.
for them, and did what I could, but it really affected me, I think, because she's a dear friend and because of course I'm identifying. It's incredible that people are we're so safe in Europe. Things just don't really happen like that. It's like,
No, it's not the same, is it? I don't, we learned after we came here um, that apparently, according to certain law, LORE, this is one of the safest places to be when the ship goes down, sort of thing.
yeah,
Because you're right, nothing really happens. I mean, we're 20 minutes from Carcassonne, so an hour from Toulouse, but we don't really live near any big cities. So,
yeah.
yeah. It certainly feels safe. What can I say? I'm a little bit hesitant because after that one went through Asheville, I thought, oh gosh, no one's really safe from climate events, really. But protection is good. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good for us all to help each other and support each other and pray and meditate and chant and do all of these things, because there's energy on the earth that needs working with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a whole other
It's a
topic,
whole
isn't
other
it?
topic
So, yeah, yeah,
as we
yeah.
look at the US election coming down the road.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
I
where are you with the Blue Rose now?
Well, I think that I think very specifically at this moment, it's been designing this course, which I've never given before, anything like this, really. And I was actually starting to create another course for Jocelyn's Sacred Planet. And I don't know what happened. It was back in April, I think, when she asked me, she said, do you want to do a course? And I said, oh, I don't know, think about it. Anyway, I was starting to write this other thing, and suddenly it was as if someone took the pen away. And I just wrote out the whole thing in about half a day. And that's the one that I'm doing at the moment, starting on Thursday. Yeah. So it's, in a way, I suppose, it's kind of bringing together things that I've been thinking about for the last few years and linking them very much to my experience as it's unfolded for me specifically about the Blue Rose, which was a lot about the Grail legends that led me to alchemy because of the connection between, the Grail as a chalice and the Grail as a stone. Those are two important themes in alchemical mysticism. And then, well, first of all, I designed those pilgrimages because she initially, after about 6 months, she said, what you're receiving here is not yours. You need to find a way of sharing it. And I said, oh, what do you mean? How can I? I'm not sure what you mean. She said, just make it up. Just make it up. So I thought, oops, okay, I'll make it up. So that's when it came to me to design those pilgrimages based on, well, the first two were specifically on her and the Blue Rose mysteries. And that was, yeah, we went to a lot of the sites around here that are connected to Mary Magdalene, Rennes le Chateau, of course, being one of them. And then, but there are many others. And of course, Montségur is a huge one because of the Cathars that were burnt at the stake there towards the end of the genocide years. Terrible, terrible tragedy, of course. but you know, you kind of hope that when you enter sacred space, like places like that, that you're helping to talk about the ancestors. You help your, you know, helping to bring back what they were so completely dedicated to in their community. And even today now, I know the group that calls themselves the Tradition. They don't call themselves Cathars. They're the ones that hold the original manuscript of Mary Magdalene's Gospel. So the journeys were important, and then we went to Crete and mainland Greece for the oracular tradition and the bee priestesses, because Mary Magdalene is very connected to the symbol of the bee, also to Venus, as you say, and to the oracular tradition, and that relates very much to Delphi, the portal at Delphi. And then the third one was to Sacred Britain, because of the journeys that, well, I know Claire Hartsong talks about it in her book, but it makes complete sense to me that they traveled to various, I'm sure they traveled to the Isis temples in Egypt and learned the death and rebirth mysteries there. They went to the Druid community in England at Glastonbury, huge portal there, and any number of other sacreds actually up and down in France and Europe and Vézelay and all of that. So that was, and then COVID came, so I was forced to, in fact I had to cancel my 2020 journey because of, and then I haven't really got back into doing it because during COVID lockdown, that was it 2 years or 1 year? It went back and forth.
It went over 2 years, yeah. Because I know I didn't see my son, my oldest son, in the UK for 2 years because I couldn't actually get in because I didn't have time to quarantine, having another son back here. So it was 2 years, didn't see him.
Yeah, that's right. Because I didn't see my son, his wife who lived in the States, either for 2 years. It was terrible, wasn't it? So during that time, that's when I kind of did quite a lot of the reading and research, and I also did try to understand much more about sacred geometry as well, because of my love of the crop circles and deepening into what they're about as well, actually, because what I love about them, apart from their undeniable beauty, is I don't worry about so much where do they come from. But what I've learned from my colleagues in a group that I participate in on the crop circles, the ones that are sacred geometers, is the large number of formations that have incredibly complex geometries in them. And I know because I visited them from time to time as I could, and I think 2008 was the first time I went into one. And then at various other times, 2012 was a big year. I was talking at the, when they still had it in person, the Devices Crop Circle Conference that year. Had a very powerful experience in one of them. And then again in 2019, which was the year we did the Sacred Britain journey. And we asked, the group meditated and asked for a formation. And we were quite specific about our requests because we needed it to be in a farmer's field that was okay for us to go in, because they've got more and more reluctant, understand.
Okay. Yeah.
To let people in their fields. But this one was just overjoyed. And we said it, and it must be within a 30-minute drive of where we were. And there it was 33 minutes. So we thought, well, that's pretty good. So, and that was the Sun-Moon formation in Clearwood. And that was such a incredible one also. It became sort of the crop circle of the season. It was based on the same geometry as Stonehenge. sun moon temple also. And it was just the horns of the moon cradling the big sun in the middle that I found so compelling. Powerful alchemical image of the marriage of masculine and feminine. So yeah, and I guess the other thing that I feel is very connected to the blue rose, so the crop circles for sure, and this blue energy coming from the cosmos, the subtle energies that you were describing that you experienced, on the edge of the water there. And I'm fascinated by that, what they are, and because that's the aim of the alchemical transformation process is the creation of the subtle body. And what I've discovered, certainly from my experiences, is that experiences of the subtle body, which is hard to talk about in the first place, just to get the words, but it also leads to these other domains and other landscapes. And I feel those other landscapes are really opening their portals and opening their doors, again, to help teach us in this path of, the wisdom of the heart, really. I think you say it's a heart journey. And that's what the earth needs, I think, more than anything else. And we have to try to, because many of us didn't get that much help with understanding what love was really. And so it's a journey that I think people more and more, as you were saying, no one goes to church anymore. It's as if the spirit, which as we know blows where it wills, isn't contained in the structures and institutions of religions. It's fallen out of that, and it's fallen into matter. And I think the crop circles are a signature of that. But it's also fallen into everyone's heart as, as individuals. People are just on this search, as you know, from your business, from your work, for a much, much deeper connection to themselves, to the earth, and to the cosmos. And, along those lines, I think you were on the Sacred Oils course.
Yes, yeah. I've done several things with Felicity. Yeah.
She's brilliant on the sacred oils. And of course, Mary Magdalene was a priestess of the sacred oils. I really learned that first in Egypt. My second journey there, I was 8 weeks at the House of Life in Abydos on a long retreat and initiation, as it turned out. Anyway, so oils was the use of sacred oils, especially for them, it was rose, lotus, was a huge part of the healing, and was historically in Egyptian celestial medicine. And that's what Felicity talks about too. She talks about the sacred oil tradition, that she's clearly a mistress of that tradition.
Yeah, that's it. Because I mean, the people who are listening, we're talking about Felicity Warner, Soul Midwife.
That's right.
.com, I think, is something like she's a soul midwife.
Soul midwife. Soul midwife.
I'll put the link. I'll put the link in the show notes anyway. But she's sort of created this whole school of being a soul midwife, and that's what she's really known for, and it's fantastic. And she has a lovely sacred oils book as well with things on how to work with. But actually, what I find the most amazing is when she's working with the Magdalene and teaching about that. That's the bit. It's just, for me, it's like, this is incredible. And she told me that she was in Copenhagen and met the lady who taught her this oil law in Copenhagen. And I was like, Wow, I didn't expect that. That was like, that was
Yeah,
a,
that must be really nice. Well, yeah,
yeah,
apparently
yeah,
she's there as you've experienced.
yeah, 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 very much so. But I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying about Sirius and the Pleiades and
Um,
Venus. I mean, these aren't things, they weren't the way that I would naturally go because, I loved UFOs and sci-fi things when I was a kid, but even in my spirituality, I wasn't that comfortable with extraterrestrials and all that sort of thing. But it kept cropping up. It kept turning up. And, there was just so many signs and yeah, channeling things and feeling their energies. In the end, I had to sort of go, okay,
yeah,
I
well, it's,
surrender to another thing.
UF,
You know?
UFO contact has had a very bad press as
Mm.
the crop circles continue to have too. It's absolutely awful, actually. It's so wrong, um, because millions of people have had not only sightings, but have had profound experiences of transformation through their contacts. And now that the American government has passed a law saying that it's time that all the government agencies in the US stop their denial, I think increasingly over the next few years, we're going to see more and more about this. I mean, the star beings talk about ancestors. They were the ancestors and teachers of indigenous traditions from the beginning of time. And because I'm sure that Jesus and Mary knew deeply the Egyptian protocols of death. I mean, Egypt is a star culture.
Mm.
And so it would have just been normal, I think, for them to have been in contact with the teachers and wisdom keepers from other worlds. Why not? I mean, we can't be alone in the universe. That's not even a rational thought,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, and these are things that I've really awakened to now. And I'm in my mid-50s now, and I find myself in a process of casting out the things that I've internalized from the culture that we've grown up in. Because,
Yeah,
I never fitted into this culture. I couldn't find myself in it.
exactly.
But now things have changed a lot since I was born in 1970. There is
Yeah,
actually, and some people are quite critical of the new age. And, in anything, there's always, pros and cons, but there's a lot of amazing stuff in the new age. And as someone who experiences life as energy, it's
yeah.
energy, it's all energy to me. I can feel the energy in everything.
Mm,
I fit into the new age, being that being that person, and it's given me a home, and I love that. And the experiences that I have now, like portals opening up, and I make essence from the blue rose portal. I make essences from all of the like vibrational essences from all of the springs and the places that I go to, and they
mm.
hold the energy.
Yeah, of course they do.
And
Yeah,
that's so magical. That's
yeah,
that's such a gift. It's
mm,
incredible.
yeah.
Is it actually a Blue Rose course that you're teaching with at the moment then that you're going to be starting?
The one I'm starting is it's yeah, it's the Book of Life and the Mysteries of the Blue Rose.
Oh, how fabulous. That's wonderful. I'm so
So
happy to hear
it's
that.
it's just basically it's 5 sessions. It's just basically going with what I particularly was given about the Blue Rose mysteries, which has expanded in all, like for you, it's expanded in these various directions over the last few years. And yeah, I just keep going with it really. So,
Are you planning on doing any more writing about it?
well, I did start another manuscript actually back earlier in the year. and I didn't like, I felt that I hadn't found the right language for it in terms of where I've become, where I've got to. I was trained as an academic, and I taught in that field for a number of years. And when you talk about, getting rid of the contracts that you you made. I mean, when I wrote this book, I thought, okay, now I've written basically my theory of everything in there for when it was published in 2012. But so I feel like I don't need to do another book like that, which took a long time and was a labor of love, of course. But and again, I was following a thread through a forest, because it didn't start off to be this book. It started off to be a book about anomalous experiences. And it turned, you get guided along the way, and it turned into what it became. But I feel now that I need to free myself from all the need to even justify. I'm 20 years older than you, so I've got a few more codes to get rid of. Anyway, I feel that I can only do it in the voice that I feel is authentic for me now, if that makes any sense.
I do, yeah, that does make sense. But I just want to say how much I appreciate about the talks that you've given, and also the essay that you have about the Blue Rose, because as someone who's a channel and an energy healer, I have all these felt experiences, but trying to put it into language and to put words on it is very, very hard. And I do my best, but I do what I do. And I love reading what you write, because you express so beautifully well, Veronica, what I'm feeling. And that's just such a precious gift. So of course I'm encouraging you.
Oh, well, you are very kind, and thank you. That means a lot, because one does doubt sometimes.
Of course, because of because of where we've come from, and the people that we've known and what they would have said about it. And I mean, I understand that completely, as a person who's not even accepted by the society that I live in. And Denmark is even more conservative like that. So it's very hard for me, and I have to really work at feeling okay about who I am. And I do always dread, though, people say to me, what do you do?
I know. I have that too, especially if they say, what are you doing, in your house all that time? I said, well, actually, I hardly notice lockdown, because I work at home, and anyway, but then if I say I'm writing, and I try to say something that they won't just sort of lead to another question about it, or I try to make it sound much more normal than in fact. But yeah, immediately around here, of course, there are many people who are Magdalene people that come here, and there are very few really that I feel, I hate to say this, but that I really feel drawn to. But that's because everybody gets a different piece of it, so I'm fine with that. But yeah, it's hard when I do find. That's why I thought I'll do the course first. Maybe that'll help me find the voice. But next spring I am thinking about revisiting the writing.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you know that course, will that be like recorded and online for people to access after you've done it?
Well, you had to sign up for it by last week.
Okay.
And it was kind of a donation-based thing to make it widely available for people, so they wouldn't not come because they couldn't afford to pay for it. So I was very happy with that.
Yeah.
But then, so it's that starts in a couple of days and then goes for 5 weeks. But then I'll have it, and then so I'll probably do something with it.
Yeah.
So
okay. All right then. Yeah, because I'm just thinking people listening to this will probably think, oh, I'd really like to do that, and wondering how I could connect them to that, basically.
You know Jocelyn?
Not personally, no.
Well, when she told me last week on Thursday, well, my time, Thursday evening, because no, Friday evening, because that was Thursday evening, US time. New York time was the midnight was the time to, but then she said, but we might have some stragglers. So I'm just thinking if you wanted to join up, I could certainly ask her.
Okay.
But if not, I'm pretty sure I will do something myself just from my own website. And when I do that, I will certainly let you know. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's
Brilliant.
any for
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
I should have told you about it actually. I'm not quite sure I didn't.
Because you've been too busy, Veronica, just trying to do everything that you have to do every day. Isn't that true? It's just life.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, let me know, and I'll also, because I do quite a lot of social media, so I'm quite
Oh,
good at sort of sending stuff out there. Yeah.
oh, that's brilliant. Do you do websites? I need a new website. I've got
I don't make them, no.
I need a new website that actually want to call the Blue Rose. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh my
Yeah.
God. I just love that. I love that so much. I love that so much. Before we finish, is there any last thing that you feel we didn't cover or that you wanted to mention or any last thoughts?
Oh my goodness. Now, of course, I can't think of a thing. Um, off the top of my head, no, this has been very pleasant. I will show you my little cup
Oh,
from
I read
Egypt.
it. I read about that. That's just so lovely. I
It's
mean, so
so sweet.
magical.
See how tiny it is?
Oh, and for
It's my
people,
treasure beyond measure. It really, really has got a little feather in it. Whoops.
because I will put this on YouTube and I'll have it as a podcast. So for people that are listening, Veronica has
Yeah.
this beautiful, it looks, is it silver?
Do it's not, I don't think. I think it's metal. And I found it in the gutter outside
Yeah.
of the sacred oil manufacturers on the way to a Coptic church that has paintings of Mary Magdalene with her head on Jesus' shoulder, and a crypt devoted to Mary Magdalene. And so all on one day, 2 days roughly before I was coming home, I found this. So it's like one of the hugest gifts of my life. Or rather, it must have found me, because at one point she said, early on actually, well, I was deep in this meditation with her and with Jesus, actually, Yeshua. And so they were telling me all these things, and in the imagination, they gave me this absolutely beautiful Grail cup in that domain beyond time, space sort of thing. But at the end, she said, and you will find, she said, and you will find a cup. And she said, actually, don't worry about it because it's going to find you. This is my cup that found me. And I did in between buy one from Chalice Well in Glastonbury. Beautiful one, actually. But this is such a treasure because it was given to me.
Yeah.
One of those
Yeah.
amazing things, really. So this is my Blue Rose cup. And I think it's metal. So I think it must have belonged, God, I don't know. Can you imagine? Was it someone, that had this because it's got roses all over it?
It's just hard to imagine, isn't it, how that could appear in a gutter because it's such a magical, mystical object. Yeah.
And so symbolically huge because Mary Magdalene was left in the gutter for 2,000 years.
Oh, yes,
Um,
yes.
it's hugely, and and I thought, okay, you have to. There's something here that I have to really pay attention to. So that's what I'm trying to do, and because this was huge, obviously. So yeah, maybe this is what I'd like to offer people before we go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I have something of the same impulse since the Blue Rose energy appeared in my life. I have spent quite a lot of hours talking about it, making stuff on YouTube and
Mm.
seeing what else I could find out from other people. And it feels like something that needs to be released out into the
Yeah,
world. And
yeah,
people just, that image of the blue rose, it's something that just catches people. They don't know why, they don't know what it means. And then
yeah.
they're looking, you know, for a place to make some sense of it. So
Well, that just actually spawns an idea. It would be wonderful, really, to have some sort of online, I don't know what class, some, I don't know whatever, of people who are actively teaching and thinking about this and preoccupied with following this path of the blue rose.
yeah. I mean, I have thought about that. I think I know about three other people. I know of at least three other people who are teaching Blue Rose stuff in one way or another to a greater or lesser degree. And then a couple of other people I've heard of that have written things and done things, but don't seem to be doing it like full time. And I was thinking, is that enough? Is that enough to do a summit or something? But I would love for that to happen.
Yeah, I think it would be, and I think it would be a great starting point because
Mm,
those that were drawn to the symbol and the
mm.
image didn't know much about it. I mean, I had a good response for my course. I was really shocked at how many people seem interested, actually. And I think there is more than we probably know,
Mm.
especially with this blue rose influx from the cosmos at the moment. It's probably one of those times to think about that anyway.
Yeah.
Something to meditate.
Thank you so much for today, Veronica.
You're so welcome, so welcome. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it enormously and getting to know you and being able to talk about these powerful realities that we're dedicated to.
Yes, thank you. And wishing lots of blue rose blessings to everybody who's watching and listening. Bye for now.